Thanks so much, Jessica. It's lovely to be here again. And as Jessica said, this is a really interesting topic, something that lots of people are asking about a lot of the time. So I'll dive straight in. And just to make a couple of points right at the get-go, that actually there are many choices for doing a literature review. And it's really important when you're thinking about using MAXQDA for your literature review to think about the different types of literature review methodologies there are. And there's an article here, which is a really good starting point if you're not very familiar with those different ways of going about doing a literature review. So there are at least 14 different literature review types, so like methods of doing a literature review. And there are, of course, many tools in MAXQDA. I'm sure you've all been engaging already in all of the spotlight sessions here at MAXDAYS, and you'll know that there are many tools in the software. So what we have to do is we have to think about how we can use tools appropriately for the particular literature review that we want to do. Why that is because, of course, literature is a form of qualitative data and reviewing is the form of analysis. So actually, a lot of the tools that we have at our disposal in MAXQDA could be used at various points in a literature review. So it's about thinking carefully about the needs of your particular review and then picking and choosing the tools that you have at your disposal in MAXQDA appropriately for those methods. Okay, so having said that, I just want to bring up this list. This list I think I could make a lot longer actually, but this is from a few years ago when I first did a spotlight session on literature reviews, and I was thinking through all of the different features in MAXQDA that I could potentially use for a literature review. And actually, the ones at the top I have covered in previous spotlights. So if you're interested in any of those topics, then do go to the MAXQDA YouTube channel where you can see previous spotlights that I've done on those aspects of literature reviews. But of course, relatively recently, we have got the amazing new AI assist tools. So what I'm going to do today is focus on those tools and think about how we can use AI assist tools for literature reviews. And there's many ways that could happen. We can summarize. We can code, we can explain, and we can chat. So what I'm going to do in this session is go into MAXQDA shortly and show you and think about different ways that we might use some of those AI assist tools. So let me just flick into MAXQDA. I'm hoping that you can now see my MAXQDA screen instead of my PowerPoint slides. And what I've done here is just to prepare a MAXQDA project that's got a number of full text PDF articles. Can't remember how many there are, but if I activate and make my screen bigger, I'll be able to see how many there are. 16. So when I activate, I can see how many I've got. I've got 16 articles, and they are around the topic of bullying at schools, but also cyberbullying. So I've just gathered those selections together. And I want to start off thinking about how we could use AI Assist to summarize. And there's different levels at which we can summarize with AI Assist in MAXQDA. Let's start off thinking about document summaries. So if I've got a limited amount of time and I want to get a quick overview of what's going on in a particular article, then of course I can read the abstract, and one would hope that abstracts are giving a good summary, but I can also ask AI Assist to help. So let me just go to this particular article, and I have already created a summary using AI Assist. So here's a little memo. When you do a document summary in MAXQDA using AI Assist, it comes up here in the text. So you can see that that's slightly longer maybe. And in fact, you have some choices when you create an AI Assist summary. So I'm going to show you the process actually using this one down here. So I don't even need to have it open, but I usually do. Here's the article at the top. And if I right click On that document, in my document menu, then I've got the AI Assist tools there, and I can ask for the summary. I don't even have to have the summary in the same language that that the actual article is in. So if I've got an article that's written in a language that I can't read myself, then this can be a really useful tool. I'll keep it with English. I can have a short, medium, or a long summary. I would normally go for long because I want it to be a bit more detailed maybe than what's in the abstract. And I can choose to have the text in bullet points or not. This time I'll choose not to because I've shown you one already. And when I click OK, then it will probably tell me that it will take a moment or two. But just to remind you, if you haven't seen AI Assist in action before, you do need to be logged in. You can see up here I'm logged in. It's done it fairly quickly, but it will only work on documents which have a character limit of no more than 5,000 characters. So if you've got really long articles, that won't work. So here you can see the summary. We haven't got time to read the summary, but if you wanted to test this out yourself, then you would need to, of course, know what's actually in the article as well. So read the article yourself. And I don't think that any of these AI Assist tools are to be used instead of reading the articles. They're really to assist us in our literature review rather than to replace what we may previously have done. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. It can be, if you want to experiment, a good way to experiment with that kind of summary could be to read an article and summarize it yourself and then have AI Assist summarize it and see what the differences are in the way that that works. But summarizing a document is just one way into thinking about how these tools can be helpful. I also think it's useful to summarize coded segments. And for this example, I'm always very interested in methods. So as I'm sure you're aware, many articles have a methods section, especially if they are articles which are detailing the results of a study or something. And I would normally want to read the methods maybe first, actually, just so that I can, I need to be sure that the methods are appropriate so that I can trust the results of the study. And so what I've done here is I have created a code called methods. You can see that here. And I've actually previously coded, if I double click, I can access one of them. I've previously coded the methods section in 15 of these articles. And what I can now do is say to AI Assist in exactly the same way, right click, go to the AI Assist function and ask to summarize coded segments. I won't do that live just for time. I've already done it. Here you can see that what I've got in the summary here, just ignore the subcode suggestions. We'll talk about those in a moment. But down here, I've got a summary of all of those methods sections. But these are the methods sections of 15 different articles. Okay, so what it's not doing for me here is breaking that down by article. Yes, it's looking at all of them and giving me a sense of them collectively. And that could be useful just to get a quick sense of what's going on. But I've lost the difference between the different 15 articles by doing it in that way. So I actually think that it can be more useful to summarize the method sections in a slightly different way. And there's two alternative ways that you might do that. So you might do that by using summary grids, which is going to give us a comparative way of thinking about this. So you may have noticed that I have activated the methods code here. I know it's activated because it's purple here. I will keep all of the articles going, and I'm just going to flick up to analysis here and go to summary grids. There is a session on summaries that I'm doing later today, actually, if you want to know more about summary grids. But here I've got my methods code, and I've got a column for each of the articles. And some of the summaries have already been created, the ones with the green background. So when I choose this one here for the Collier article, at the top here, I can see what was coded. So the whole of the methods section. And then down at the bottom, I've used the function here to automatically summarize the methods section for that one article rather than all of them collectively. I'll just do that very quickly for this one here that I hadn't already done. The process is very similar. Again, you need to decide whether you want to work with short, medium, long. I would always make the same choices for all of them. But now what I'm doing is I'm getting a summary for each method section one by one. And when that's happened, you can see that happens very quickly. Again, in a real situation, I would have to read this and think about whether I thought that was useful. But what I wanted to show you was the comparative level of this, having done that for all of them, and I haven't done it for all of them in this little example today, but I can go to summary tables, and here's one I created earlier. And what I've now got is a column with all of the summaries one by one, and that gives me much more of a comparative understanding. And for a literature review, that's really, really useful, I think, in terms of thinking about, okay, what's going on with the methods. And then with these summaries, I would then go back and read the articles in more depth to start thinking through how that might be useful. Okay, so hopefully what I'm illustrating here is that summarizing, because we can do it at different levels and have the summaries presented in different ways, that affords different possibilities for how these tools can be useful for us in a literature review. It's also worth knowing, actually, that you can get a summary at the segment level as well. So if I go to one of those methods ones, let's go to this one. So here's a section, a methods section in another article, this one here by Zarello. Having selected that text, which I've selected via that methods code, I can also get the summary by right-clicking here and getting a summary of the selected text, which is the same as what I was doing in the summary grid, but this time it's going to present it to me in a different way. So I'm going to get the summary over here on the right-hand side. I'm on my tiny little laptop, so it's a little bit squished today, but it's brought it up in a memo so I can read it there. But it's also displaying it for me on the right-hand side in the right-hand panel. So then you get the summary next to the text rather than in the grid view. So I would like you to think, if you're going to use these tools, about the presentation of the summaries as well as the level at which you might be summarizing data. Okay, so basically, if I was working with methods or any aspect like that, then I may use the latter two summary tools I showed you, the summary grids, or doing them one by one so I can see them on the side. But if I was working with a topic-based code, so here I've done some coding previously around the topic of mental health. Okay, so it makes more sense to me, and you can see that I've done it that I can access it from here to summarize topic-based materials across multiple documents. That makes more sense because we've got little bits of data, little segments within the articles about the topic of mental health. So it makes more analytic sense to summarize those together than it would those separate different method sections that I really want to understand in relation to the article. So here I can do the same thing again, but interestingly, here I can choose to summarize around a topic, mental health, but only in certain documents. So if I'd previously activated all of the literature articles that were published before 2000, I could summarize the mental health topics in those articles separately from the mental health topics in the articles that were published after that date. So get a comparison on that level by doing it twice by focusing in on activated documents. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to move away from summarizing now, but hopefully there's a few little examples there that are useful. and just very quickly say something about explaining. So sometimes when you are reading an article, you'll see a technical term or a theory or something like that that you're not very familiar with. And what you may have done in the past is go off and research that and check it out. We can use the explain option to help us with that. I'm going to bring up the all memos options here because I've already created a few of these previously. So let's just get rid of my code memos. I want to see my in-document memos. Where have they gone? Let's move these out of the way. Here we go. So here are two that I've done already. So this one here, oops. So in this article by Duong et al., they talk about structural equation modeling, and I'm not really a quantitative analyst, so I asked AI Assist to quickly give me an explanation of what that means. Now, this is a slightly different function in the sense that it's really, really important that you don't take these definitions or explanations at face value. I would want to go off and research that in a lot more detail afterwards. But as a quick kind of sense checking, what's going on here? What are they talking about? That might be really useful. So here's another one from a different article about when I asked it to explain socio-emotional consequences. So it's just giving me a little bit more context that I can then go and check out in more detail later on. So I find that to be really useful because it means that I'm not stopping my work to check all of those things out. I'm just quickly having AI Assist help with that. Okay, so let's move on and talk about chatting with a document. So if I bring up this article again and I say, okay, I don't want to summarize, but I want to have a chat. I want to ask some questions using prompts and I can chat with the document, one document at a time, and I can put my query in here. So this might be something that I could do at various different stages of a literature review. I can say what methods were used in this study to understand bullying, and it will give me an answer, hopefully relatively quickly today. And then I can, based on the response that I can get, I can delve further in and ask follow-up questions based on the response. So again, we haven't got time to read this and think about it in detail, but I do want you to see that where it's telling us something, so it examines student perceptions and teacher responses to violence, etc., etc. Here it's giving me the page numbers where it came from, and these are interactively linked. So when I click on this page 7, page 8, it's giving me the actual evidence in the background. So in that way, I'm starting to have a dialogue, a sort of interactive dialogue based on maybe some of the work I've done previously with the data. And what's really nice with this chat function is that you can copy here, you can copy the response to the clipboard and take it out of MAXQDA if you wanted to, but we've also got a chat history. So if you've had a previous chat with this document, where's the one I did previously? This is the first one, I think. Yes, here's a previous chat where I asked, how does this study build on previously published research? So it's remembering the conversations, the dialogues that you've had previously, and that can be an additional way to start thinking about what's going on at the level of the document. Okay, so that's chatting with a document, but analytically, what we might also want to do is think about what we can do with codes. Okay, so I showed you the methods code earlier. If I right click on a methods code and go to the AI Assist, we talked about how we could summarize coded segments earlier, but we can also chat with the segments of a code. Okay, so rather than chatting with one document, I can chat with all of those segments that are coded at methods. So I can ask specific questions. But what we have here is really important to be aware of. There is a limit to the amount of text that you can chat with. Okay, and that's to do with how large language models work. Okay, large language models are not really very good at working with huge volumes of data. So MAXQDA have put a limit on that so that it's working more usefully. And you can see that I've got a total number of characters which exceeds the maximum for doing this. How I would get away around that would be to bring up my my retrieve segments, and I would activate my methods and then activate just some of them. So maybe earlier I talked about how I might activate all of the articles that were published before a particular date or after a particular date. Here, just for the illustration, I'm just activating the first few, and then I can chat with these listed coded segments. So I'm still chatting around the topic of methods, but only for certain articles based on, in a real situation, I wouldn't randomly choose the articles. I'd choose them based on some kind of grouping that made analytic sense, and then I can have my conversation there. So that's chatting with one document at a time, or multiple coded segments across several documents based on whatever groupings that you've decided. Sometimes you can chat with a code because you don't hit that limit. Okay, so the final thing to talk about quickly is to do with coding. Okay, and there's a couple of things. We can generate code suggestions using AI Assist, and we can also have the software do some coding for us. And you would have to think very carefully about the role and purpose of coding generally in your literature review. But let's have a look at some examples. So here in the mental health code again, which is a topic-based code, in there you may have seen previously that we have already asked the software to suggest some codes. So remember, these are segments which relate to mental health in some aspect across multiple documents, and it's coming up with some potential subcodes. So here, LGBTQ and mental health, and underneath here, it's giving me some examples from the data that may fit into that. The second sub-theme is bullying and mental health, school environment and mental health, and so on. So that's giving us lots of suggestions that we can think about, but it's not doing any coding. It's just giving us some suggestions, but it's also, I'll just do it again so you can see how it works. Right click again, suggest subcodes. And this is the option that you need to think about. If you don't add a bullet list, I won't this time so we can see the difference, then you just get a list of suggested subcodes without those examples. Whereas if you choose the bullet list, then you get the examples as well, but this time they're not interactively linked. Remember, in the chat, we had some hyperlinks whereby we could see the extracts in the text. That's not happening here because this is in a memo, but this time, this is what I've just done. Oops, just now at the bottom. It's listing potential subcodes. Okay, some of them are the same, some of them are different. You may not already know, but when you run this kind of generative AI functionality twice, you may get slightly different responses for certain types of tasks. So here I'm getting 10 potential subcodes to think about. Above here, I've got 4, but I've got some examples underneath. So that's subcode suggestions, but no coding is happening there. That's a little bit different from what you can do at a text segment. So if you see, sometimes you're working with, it might not be literature, it could be other forms of data, and you know that something's really interesting and really important, and you know you need to code for it, but you can't really think what might be a useful code. So in that instance, it can be really useful to select some text and then have MAXQDA's AI Assist give you some suggestions. I'm going to do that based on the abstract here. In fact, I'll do it on a different one because I've already done those two. I'm going to come back and show you the results in a minute. So it might sound a bit weird to you to think about doing this for the abstract, but I'm going to right click and ask it to suggest new codes for the selected text to show you what happens. Again, I can choose the language. I might want them in a different language, but I'll stick with English for today. And what AI Assist will do is give me a series of grouped ideas based just on the abstract, and that abstract was not very long, as you probably saw, and it's giving me 3 groups of suggested codes: thematic codes, some more thematic codes but alternative ones, and then more sort of nuanced interpretive codes. And if we chose some of those, so let's say we thought that some of those were quite useful, I can pick out the ones I'm interested in and then click OK. The coding will happen, and you see that happening here. Okay. Now, one thing that I think is useful in terms of sort of layering up and thinking a little bit about this in relation to suggested subcodes is that often what I have found useful is to code all of them. So these are all of the suggested codes from the abstract of this article here, the one by Bolton, and I coded them all, but then I unlinked them. Okay, so in this example, I just chose 3, but then I unlinked them. Why? Because I don't want them to actually be applied to the abstract. I want to be thinking about what might be useful codes. Okay, and I've done that for 2 initially, because I just want to show you that you're getting quite a lot of suggestions and things to think about. And maybe I'm not yet ready to actually use them. I just want to play around with them and think about them. I'm getting the software to assist me here in thinking about codes. And what I've found useful is to then put these suggested codes from several articles, the abstracts of several articles, into a map. And then I might move them around and start to say, okay, what's similar and different about these codes, which might inform the way that I want to start coding in terms of aspects which are useful. So it might be that I want to start to move these around and group them and say, okay, some of these seem to be to do with the victims of bullying. Some of them seem to be to do with the perpetrators of bullying. And some of them seem to be to do with interventions or other sort of reactions to bullying. And so I can start to group these codes and start to think about, okay, are similar ideas coming up based on those abstracts in different articles? And there's another spotlight. I think Graham did a spotlight on using creative coding to restructure your coding system. I won't show you that now, but I could start to build a coding scheme, not doing any coding at this stage, out of those suggested codes from the abstracts. And I found that to be a useful thing to do. Okay, I'm aware that I've only got a couple of minutes left. So the final thing that I'm going to do is just to talk about actually having AI Assist do some coding for us. And we can do that based on one document and one code at a time. So I'm just going to bring back my documents. So I decided earlier to do that for this code here, which is called normalization of violence. And to have this work, what you have to do is you have to have a code, and that code has to have a definition. And this one actually was created from the code suggestions that I've just been talking about from the Berkowitz article, and having created that code, and I could add, I didn't, but I could add some additional information to the definition here if I wanted to, but just to show you what happens, here is the code. It's coded 10 segments. Let's open up that article and have a look at those segments. In fact, we can get to them most quickly by doing this. What's really nice about how this works is that it highlights the segment that it's coded, and then it tells you, let's take this one because we can see it more easily. It tells you here in the margin here, it's noting here for us the rationale, the reason why this segment was coded. So I'm just going to show you that for a different article. So let's go for Bolton. Now remember this code here, normalization of violence. Okay, this was created from a different article, but I'm now going to go and see if that code also exists in this article. So I'm going to do AI coding. And you'll see here that we're doing it for Bolton, but we're doing it for normalization of violence using the same definition. But as I said, you may want to put a little bit more thought than I did in this example into those definitions. The more specific you are, the more useful coding you're probably going to get. But hopefully, it's not found any. So this is really important to understand in terms of hallucination. I get asked all the time about hallucinations, and it's not making it up. It's looked through. It hasn't found anything that fits that. So I now know that that idea is not coming up in that article. Okay, but if it had have done, it would have presented itself in this way, like we've got for the previous one. And I really like the fact that it's very clearly indicating to us when something is or isn't present. And when, of course, you're doing a literature review, it would be really important, wouldn't it, to know which aspects were coming up in certain articles or not. Okay, I could keep talking for hours and hours about this, but hopefully that's given you a little bit of a way into thinking about what might be some starting points for you to think about how you can integrate AI Assist into your literature reviewing process. So I think we've now got some time for some questions. Let me have a look at the Q&A. So I'm going to start at the top of the list. Do you recommend conducting the literature review as part of the same project as, i.e. the grounded theory? Do you mean by that in the same MAXQDA project? I think that's probably what you mean by that question, assuming that's what you mean. That's a really good question. And people have different ways of thinking about this. I would say normally, if you've got one research study, one PhD or one research study or whatever, then you want to have one MAXQDA project, because I want to be able to make comparisons later on between what the literature said about my topic, okay, what was already known about bullying and how was bullying being researched in the past. I want to be able to see how my study has contributed to knowledge around that topic area. So I definitely want to end up with one MAXQDA project which has everything in it. So I normally say one study, one MAXQDA project. However, there are some reasons why you might not immediately start off in that way. So it could be that you do your literature review in a MAXQDA project, and then you do you start your data analysis in a separate one, and then you bring them together later. That can also, technically, that can be possible. And some people find that cleaner, because some people want, especially sort of in a grounded theory, when the idea is that you're putting aside your previous knowledge about the topics when you're looking at your data, that can be easier to do if you've got a separate MAXQDA project. But I would want to end up with everything together so that I can more easily see the synergies or not. So hopefully that makes sense. The PowerPoint you will be able to download from the website, I believe. That's always been the case in the past, absolutely. The MAXQDA project, this little one that I've used to demonstrate today, I'd be quite happy to share that with you if you like. There's nothing very groundbreaking in there, but you can certainly have it to play. Just drop me an email afterwards and I'll make that available to you, not a problem. How can we use these AI tools for a systematic review? Can it help to include, exclude the articles? Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So in one of the previous spotlights I talked about using MAXQDA to identify through a process of coding, using MAXQDA to identify which articles should be in a systematic review and which ones couldn't. I did that spotlight before we had AI Assist. But nevertheless, that might be a good one to have a look at, because I think, you know, some of those tools I've shown you before, where you see the gaps, where you see that something isn't there, then that's often a basis of not taking something forward, or indeed where you see it is. So I definitely think that you could harness these AI tools to help with those kinds of inclusion, exclusion strategies. Definitely. Yeah, good idea. Next question. Do you have a strategy or a workflow for organizing your literature across multiple categories and integrating with reference managers? And how do you move to your write-up phase? I think there's 3 questions in one there, so let's break it down. Do you have a strategy or workflow for organizing literature across multiple categories? So obviously coding is part of that. But also what is part of that is variables. So I haven't talked today about variables, but I would want to be using document variables to indicate the important things about each article. So which year it was published in, but other important things about the literature, so the journal or the disciplinary context or anything else like that. And then you can do all kinds of matrices in the visual tools, these kinds of matrices here, code matrix, browser code relations, and also the crosstabs and the mixed methods would allow you to break that down. So looking at categories across, looking at coding across different categories of literature. Definitely you can do that. You can also integrate or import from a reference manager into MAXQDA. And that's also in one of my previous spotlight sessions, absolutely. But you have to think carefully about when you do that, because there isn't a dynamic relationship between a reference management tool and MAXQDA. So you need to get everything organized in your reference manager in the way you want it first before you bring it in. Writing up, if you don't know about the QTT tool, then go and have a look at the spotlight about that. But you can, as you're doing all of these things, you can add the results of your interrogations to the QTT tool, which is here in the analysis main menu, and then you can build. It's like sort of filing cabinets, I suppose. I think about it. You can create little groups well, you start off with some kind of a research question or a topic area, and you gather the evidence that helps you understand that in the QTT tool, and then you can even start writing up your emerging interpretations in there. At some point you need to get that out of MAXQDA to write up in in a word processor, but I find the QTT tool really useful as a transition between the analysis that I'm doing in MAXQDA, my final write-up. The QTT tool is like a sort of a bridge between those two things, where my interpretation starts to happen in more depth. So I find that super useful. You have to play around with the exclusion inclusion criteria in the definition of the code. I think you're talking this question here. I think you're talking about when you have the software do the coding. So you can say in your code definition, ignore certain passages, or include, or don't code where this is present, only code where that is present, those sorts of things. But you definitely have to play around with it to understand what kind of prompts or instructions are going to really focus the AI to get it to find what you want. And what I found to be super useful is to initially code yourself around whatever the topic might be. So the one that I played with is under here, isn't it? So I would, to you need to sort of learn to trust that the AI is doing useful things for you. And one really good way of doing that is to first code yourself. Okay. And then get the AI to code and see what the similarities and differences are in how you would have coded to that code and how the AI is. And then if it's not finding the same things that you did, then you start to think about, okay, well, why is that? Maybe sometimes it's finding something that you missed, or maybe your instruction in the code memo isn't precise enough for it to actually find what you really want. So all of those sort of iterative experimentations you have to undertake. How can we apply Clark and Brown's 6 stages of thematic analysis through MAXQDA? Come to my spotlight later on today, which is focusing on exactly that. I can't remember the time, but in a few hours' time, I'm doing another spotlight on thematic analysis when I go through their 6 stages and speak to how MAXQDA can be used for those. Which tools does MAXQDA offer for multi-language research? I think that probably depends on what you mean by multi-language research. I don't know if you're still there. Could you add into here what you mean? But MAXQDA, you can import documents in all kinds of different languages. Okay, so if you've got literature in 2 different languages, okay, so if you can read both of those languages, then from your perspective, that's great, right? I did my PhD and I had English and Dutch data, and some of my codes, this was before we had AI assist many years ago, but I had some codes which were Dutch words because the Dutch word better captured the meaning that I wanted to convey through my code, and some codes were in English. And I would make notes. I did most of my language in English because I predominantly think in English, but I did my Dutch interviews in Dutch, and the Dutch literature, you can have both of them together in one project. That's fine. With the AI assist tools that we've been talking about today, the fact that you can summarize in a different language can be really useful if you want to, translate things, that sort of thing.